Alright everybody, today we are going to be doing our last lesson of new content for the entire year. So exciting stuff, we've been working hard. Had the gas to the pedal since the beginning of the year, and then we're finally going to be done learning new material after today. So today we're done with the last section, 11-2 in your textbook. Just quick reminder, you got the page numbers up there. You can have these homework problems to do for some extra practice. I'm not going to be asking you to send me those homework problems, but it is very important that you do those kind of like as a test to make sure you understand the material from this lesson, because you will have a summative over this material that will be due in a couple class periods. So make sure that you're not only watching these videos, but that you're turning in or reading the pages from the book and then doing the homework that corresponds as well. As you see, all the homework are odds, so you can also go to the back of the book and check your work to get that auto correction to make sure you're understanding it and kind of helping teach yourself as you're going through and getting that extra practice. So the last thing that we're going to be learning this year is going to be learning how to do inference or do significant tests for two-way tables. All right, so up till now, we've learned a lot of different types of significance tests. So let's take a second to break down all the ones we've learned so far. So we first started off with one sample proportion and one sample mean. Then we had two sample proportion, two sample mean. After that, we had our significance test for the slope of a regression line. Last class, we learned about the chi-squared goodness of fit test, and today we're going to learn about two more chi-squared tests, which are a chi-squared test for homogeneity and a chi-squared test for independence or association. So this first video, we're just going to talk about the three different types of tests, and then we'll go on from there. So as you can see on your notes, we got these three different types of tests that we're going to talk about. So the first two are ones we haven't learned yet, and then you see the last one is the one that we learned last class period. So let's start off with a chi-squared test for homogeneity. So this is a test which we're going to do if we're given a two-way table. So remember, a two-way table, as you can see down here, this is a table that we use to display categorical data when we have more than one variable. For our goodness of fit test, we just had one variable that we're looking at that's categorical, but for these next two tests, it's dealing if we have more than one variable. Okay, so for the chi-square test for homogeneity, it's a way of determining whether two or more subgroups of a population share the same distribution of a single categorical variable. So essentially, is we're dealing with a two-way table, we're dealing with multiple variables, and the big thing that you need to know, we want to underline this, two or more subgroups of a population. So two more subgroups of a population. That's what we're looking at for a chi-square test for homogeneity. So we're using this when we're taking samples, multiple samples from different populations. So let's say I took a sample of 50 from, if I was doing a test for Cane Ridge, I did a sample of 50 freshmen, another sample of 50 sophomores, another 50 random sample for the juniors, and then a random sample of 50 for the seniors. That would be categorized as chi-square test for homogeneity because we're dealing with multiple samples. Now the second one we're going to learn today is a chi-squared test for independence, or another name for that is association. You're actually going to see association written out more in like a lot of them on the test, and a lot of materials outside of the book, but on the book they call it independence. You could do either way, but I actually prefer association, but we're going to call it both ways just so you know that there's a choice you can do and determine which name you like to call it. Either way will be fine. So for a chi-square test of independence, this is a way of determining whether two categorical variables are associated with one another in the population. Okay, so key thing we want to underline here is in the population. So we're only looking at one sample for the independence association, and then for the chi-squared test for homogeneity, that's going to be a test when we're looking at different variables within different samples. So I'll write this down: multiple samples, and then over here, one sample for the test for association or independence. All right. Now, like I said before, we also have the chi-square goodness fit test, which we learned last class period, which is where we're only dealing with one variable. Okay, and when we're dealing with a goodness of fit test, that's seeing if the results from our different variables, the distribution lines up with what we'd expect it would be. Okay, so like the example we did last class is the proportion of boxes of the cereal sold the same after we increase the price. So that would be a test of goodness of fit test. So there's three different ones. The chi-square goodness of fit test, that's kind of like a separate way of calculating that by hand. And we learned how to do that last class period using the formula. These two, chi-squared test for homogeneity and independence, are calculated exactly the same way. The only thing that's going to be different is you have to name the test at the beginning of your significance test, which one's which. And it's also going to slightly affect your hypotheses and your interpretation. But the actual calculation part, as you can see, is exactly the same. All right, so those are the three different tests, and we're going to spend the rest of today learning how to go between all three of those and learning how to calculate the new test that we are learning about today, the homogeneity and independence tests, which deal with two-way tables. The next video that you'll be watching is a video that I actually found online that I think really does a great way of further explaining the difference between these three different tests. So you're going to watch that next, and then we're going to go ahead and start off with example number 1.